All the stories you know and love in a me sort of way, bringing religion, spirituality, and who knows what else.
Listen to the Pastor with the Master battle the thunder from down under.
On Religion, Ho-Ho's Way. From the cottage studio, welcome to Religion Ho-Ho's Way. As always, I'm your host, Ho-Ho. How y'all's doing? I hope you're doing good. I really do. Today, we're going to be talking about the Tower of Babel. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. You see, the Tower of Babel is an interesting story. It really is. Because it is the origin story for the nations, for races, even possibly for different creeds. It really is. It is the origin story of how this level of division across multiple continents happened. It really is. It's the beginning of everything. I mean, oh yes, we had Genesis and the creation. We had the great flood, but this is even more than that. You know, it's significant in a different way for different reasons, but it truly is an origin story of the nations. It really is. And it wasn't until I did one of those thought exercises, you know, about the Tower of Babel, reading the story, reading what was going on, and trying to gain a little deeper understanding of truly the confusion that was going on. Because it wasn't until then, putting myself in the shoes of the people that were there, and playing this thing out in my head and viewing it and experiencing it through my mind's eye. It wasn't until then that it was like, holy crap. And it really did give me pause when I did that. It very much was a holy crap. Okay. Now, like I was saying, I mean, it answers the question of the origin story of different, you know, of the nations, because, you know, how did we go from, you know, Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden to, you know, just all the people, all of the sin and everything else that took place? How did we get from there to the flood? And then how did we get from the flood, you know, that you got Adam and Eve, two people, to the flood, back down to 8 people, and then all of the nations covering the expanse of the globe? I mean, how did we do that? Different races, different colors, different, you know, creeds, different belief systems. I mean, the whole 9 yards. How did that happen? You know, I mean, there has to be a story somewhere in the Bible that explains what happened. And the Tower of Babel is that story. It really is. So let's rewind the hands of time and let's go ahead and examine this story and let's put ourselves in the shoes and let's really focus on some of these things and you know, let's visit this, because it truly is a neat story, especially when you put yourself in the shoes of some of these people that were here and allow yourself to think about what happened. Oh, it's a cool story. So, the Tower of Babel happened during the reign of Nimrod. Now, Nimrod is the grandson of Noah. And yes, before you ask, Noah was still alive during this time frame. He was alive. He wasn't necessarily there. Nothing in Scripture points to him being there, but he was at least alive. Okay, he was somewhere doing something with somebody. I'm sure of it. He was still alive. He lived 930 some odd years after all. He was still alive. So during Nimrod's reign, you know, that you had things, and this again, how did they go from where they were to where they ended up in just a short amount of time? I don't know exactly how much time took place, but the story of Babel can be, the story of Babel, the Tower of Babylon, can be found in Genesis chapter 11. So there's not a whole heck of a lot of time the in between here. I mean, there's, you know, it's only Noah's grandson after all. It's not like we're talking thousands of years. It wasn't that long. So they're still living in the Mesopotamia area, okay? And there was some arrogance that was going on. There was some, idol worshiping that was going on. There's still hints of paganism roaming around. And we know this because of what they decided to build. Okay. But they had this great idea that, now look, there was a couple things that I'm sure that was going on in their head, and a lot of speculations as to what was the real, reason why they built the Tower of Babylon. And there, like I said, there's a lot of speculation in here. Okay. But what we see is, it's a, not that removed from the flood. Okay. And I'm sure that in the landscape, in some of the things that are there, they can still see evidence of the flood and the aftermath of it. I mean, it's not that long after it happened. So yeah, they can still see, the remnants of that. And one of the thoughts behind this Tower of Babel was to protect themselves from God's wrath. If he were to decide that he wanted to again use the flood in order to wipe out mankind on the earth, they wanted something, a safeguard. They wanted a panic room. Okay, they wanted a boat of their own, but they wanted so much more than just a boat of their own. Again, I mean, there was some arrogance at play here that's like, holy cow. So that's one of the suspected reasons as to, and is written about, of why they decided to build a tower to reach the heavens. It was to safeguard them from God's wrath. Well, another thing on this is rooted in a level of arrogance and what have you, okay? Because they wanted to, build a tower to reach the heavens. So that this way there would be, it was kind of to bring themselves to God's level and to, at the same time, knocking God off of his perch. That's kind of a thought process into there. We're going to build a tower up to the heavens to put ourselves on the same level that God is on. That's kind of part of it. It's that, here's a place where we both can get together and commune with each other on equal playing fields. That's kind of what their point of view was on this. Okay. And like I said before, there was some, hints of paganism involved in here, that they were going outside of what they knew to be true, the teachings that Noah would have given them, because they built this Tower of Babylon in the shape of a great ziggurat, which is a shape commonly used in paganism, or so it says into here. I'm not, overly familiar with the ziggurat, but there it is. Okay. And, they think that's one of the reasons as to why God chose to do what he did. It was to knock people off of their perch. Now, here's another thing, too, about this tower that they were building, okay? They weren't using traditional means to build this tower, this ziggurat. They were introducing, new frames of thought, new building structure designs and implementing heat and, not just sun baking, but putting bricks into a kiln and, introducing other things into this. Okay. And it really did strengthen, like 4 times stronger than traditional building bricks that were just baked out in the sun. This was something that was, in a matter of speaking, a huge jump in technological advance. I mean, not technological advance, but mechanical advance. This was a new way of using a building structure that they have already used, bricks. And the amount of weight that these things could handle was truly impressive. Okay. it was truly impressive. So, and it was very much one of the things that it demonstrated how this tower really could have gone high. It could have been the tallest building structure that had ever been built. Taller even than the whatever that thing is in Dubai. Okay, that really tall sucker, this thing could have been even taller than that because the building structure they were using, the bricks, was strong enough to support the weight. They knew this. That's impressive. I don't know if y'all know how tall that building is in Dubai. It's not a short building, okay? It's pretty stinking tall. And the Tower of Babel that they were constructing in Babylon had the ability to be taller. This was new ideas in building technology, something that they'd never tried before, a feat they'd never tried before, okay? God's seen what was going on. He was seeing the arrogance play out in here, and he didn't like it. He didn't like it. For one reason or another, one way, shape, or form, he didn't like it. And that is when he decided to confuse people, to divide the languages. I mean, now, I want you to stop for a second. I want you to think about this, okay? Imagine, if you will, you're on a building site, okay? You're building, you're one of the contractors involved with this huge building site. We are building a tower. We're building a skyscraper here, okay? You have steel workers, metal workers, you have framers, you have roofers, you have, people laying drywall, people laying carpet, you got electricians, you got plumbers, you got all these people working together. Now, I mean, look, you can only rely on your knowledge of your trade for so long because remember, they were working on new technologies. They're doing something that has never been done before. They're using a building block and heating it to a temperature, something that has never been done before. I mean, you can only rely on your skill that you have acquired through a mass career for so long when you're doing something brand spanking new. And that's what they were doing. Now, all of a sudden, what was happening very, very smoothly was now not happening at all. Every single person at this work site. I mean, I don't know how many languages everybody was split to at the time. I really don't know. I mean, think about it. There's a lot of languages out there, right? I mean, you've got Cantonese, Mandarin, American, English. I mean, dialects. Yes, I'm aware. Russian, Spanish. You have French. You have Italian. You've got, so many different languages and dialects. My point is, what used to be running smooth and everybody could communicate with each other, now all of a sudden they can't communicate with each other at all. And it's not like they can just rely on their skills and knowing what it is that they're supposed to do, because that only goes so far when you've never done something that, never done the thing that you're doing. That only goes so far. You can only do that so long. Everything was confused. The whole entire project fell apart because we could no longer communicate with each other effectively. I mean, that's what was going on. I mean, think about this. Really think about this for a second. I mean, think about being there when this is going on. I mean, would you have known that you're now speaking a different language? Would you have known that? I mean, imagine in the matter of an instance, you go from speaking English to speaking French. Now, I don't know. I'm like, yes, I've heard French. Yes, I know some oui and some whatever, but I don't know French, But imagine it being a language you've never heard before. You're not familiar with the dialect. You're not familiar with the sounds that comes out. And now those are the sounds that are coming out of your mouth. And even though you have no idea the words that are coming out of your mouth, you understand what it is that you're saying because it's your dialect. Can you imagine? I mean, holy cow, the confusion that must have been going on so many different levels It's like all of a sudden I'm speaking a different language. I have no idea what's coming out of my mouth, but I can understand me. I know what I mean. That's craziness. Is that how that happened, or was it all of a sudden, like everything to their own ears sounded the same? I can't even imagine that. I can't even imagine that. Yes, they understood, sure, but it still had to sound like gibberish, completely different than what they've ever spoken or heard of before. Holy crap. It's so interesting to just think that through and how this ended up happening. But now somewhere off in the distance, where everything around you is gibberish, you're not understanding anything. Everything is worse than white noise, because that here's Bob. Bob's your friend. He's your best friend. You guys have known each other since birth. He's a good guy. You guys play together. You guys party together. Now, you don't understand Bob. You can't talk to him. You can't communicate with him. You're completely separated from him now, him and his entire family. Theoretically. You're now strangers to each other. Literally in an instant. Can you imagine the level of fear that must have been going on? Because now the thing that, this is such a fundamental thing. Language, communication. This is a fundamental thing that it's hard to grasp just how important this is in our everyday lives until we no longer have it. Not just, not being around people, but not being able to communicate on a basic level, on a fundamental level. Could you imagine the fear that must have been going on through these people's minds, or in these people's minds? I can't even imagine. Can't even imagine. And now you have this feeling of being completely alone. Even though you're surrounded by in a sea of people, but you're not able to understand any of them. None of them can understand you. You can't communicate on a basic level. People whom you know, people whom you have known all your life. Now, nothing. But somewhere off in the distance, you hear something. You're hearing somebody talking. And what they're saying is making sense because they're speaking, even though you don't understand the dialect, you can understand what they're saying because you're speaking the same language. And so these people end up finding each other through the white noise, through all the noise, all the people, everything of what's going on. These the people start to kind of congregate in groups because, they kind of got to, I got to get rid of this crap. I need to be amongst people that are speaking like I am. And people start to segregate themselves and they go off into little cliques in their own areas You would have to, wouldn't you? To keep some semblance of society, you've got to flock towards people that are communicating the same way you are. Birds of a feather will flock together. They will. It's human nature, isn't it? To find out people, to seek out people that are like-minded. And this goes so much beyond that because, these are, it's not just a choice that you make based off of, a desire that you have. This is a basic necessity that these people have to do this, not just choosing. They have to do this on a fundamental level, on a psychological level that I can't even possibly understand. They had to do this. And whenever I continued to put myself in their shoes, it was hearing all of the white noise from everybody else, all the other people, all the other groups, everybody in that area. Hearing all of that, and it's like, dude, I I've got to get away. I've got to get away. I have got to go. Because over there are people that I mean, they're family. You know, we've been friends for so long that we're family, and now, you know, we're divided by this huge language barrier that happened in an instant that, you know, I'm heartbroken. You know, I'm alone. I'm beside myself. I mean, I can only assume and I can only hope that these people still had their families. But I don't know. I mean, there's nothing in there that indicates that's what happened. I mean, it says he confused the languages. It doesn't say how these divisions happened. It just said that that's what he did. So they're heartbroken. And the only way that they feel on a psychological, emotional level, trying to rationalize what is going on, trying to rationalize an unrational situation, okay, trying to understand the ununderstandable. Wow. Yeah. They had to move. They had to go. They had to get some distance between them and the people that they just couldn't be around anymore. They had to. They absolutely had to. And like I said, man, I can't even imagine the confusion that happened during that time. I can't even imagine just, you know, I can't imagine. I mean, I really can't, you know. And it really is, I mean, like, it's funny, but yet terrifying to think about. Whenever this happened, I mean, did they understand the words that were coming out of their own mouth? I mean, sure, they understood them, but did they, you know, did it sound familiar to them? You know, in their own mind's eye, were they still sounding like they always sounded? Or are they speaking something that they don't even understand? Of course, they understand what they're speaking because it's their language now. But, you know, do they get it? Do they understand it? You know, I mean, it's one of them thought exercises that always, you know, it always made me wonder and it always made me question. Now, a while back ago, you know, during another episode, I was talking about DNA. Okay. And we were talking about, you know, how in the beginning, okay, God made cats, God made dogs. God didn't necessarily make chihuahuas and wolves. He made wolves, natural selection, select breeding, survival of the fittest, manipulation. On our part, we have chihuahuas and we had wolves, but there was a time when that didn't really happen. And I was watching a video that really explained on that survival of the fittest, you know, on that type of a level. And it really explained things and how, you know, dogs, you know, were going from hither and yon and why and how these different things ended up playing out, the survival of the fittest, and, you know, this type of thing played out, you know. And it was talking about, okay, so you got this dog that, you know, within its genes, you have the building blocks to make it either a long, a short, or medium-haired animal. And if they're going up, you know, into a relatively cold, you know, area, then, you know, your short-haired dogs aren't really going to last. They're not going to be able to stand up in the cold. They're either going to die out or they're going to go, you know, further south where they are more comfortable, you know, to more moderate type of temperature, a warmer temperature. That's what you have. You know, the short-haired dogs are not going to survive very long. It's going to be a survival of the fittest. In time, you're not going to have them as part of the gene pool anymore. It's all of that's going to be weaned away. Okay. That's how these things work. Okay. That's how these things work. It's science. It's genetics. You keep going north into an Arctic, in a subarctic type of a climate, okay? Even the medium length haired dog isn't going to make it, isn't going to survive. They're either going to die off or they're going to migrate further south where they are more comfortable. The only ones that are going to be living in this area are the longer-haired dogs. Now, let's say they started going south. They're in moderate climate. And even a little warmer climate. And well, now you got the short-haired dogs that are doing just fine. The medium-haired dogs are doing all right. But the long-haired dogs, they're just not going to make it. Okay? They're going to die off. They're going to go and travel to a place where they are more comfortable, but they're not going to stick around. Selective breeding, survival of the fittest, these are how these things end up happening. They keep traveling south. Next thing you know, they're in a really, really hot climate. Now the only ones that are going to be surviving and thriving and that are going to stay there are the short-haired dogs. Even the medium-haired length dogs are not going to stay there. Survival of the fittest. Natural selection, survival of the fittest, different areas, different attributes that will help and or hinder. That's how these type of things happen. I was talking with, well, not really talking with, I was listening to a scientist, and they were talking about something. And talking about white and black people. White people and black people. And it was like, it's a construct that doesn't actually exist. There's no such thing as a truly white person, and there's no such thing as a truly black person. What you have are many, many shades of brown. We do. I mean, holy crap. I mean, look at my skin. I mean, I'm not white by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, I hold this piece of paper up to my skin, and they're not the same color. But believe me, for those of you that are listening, just believe me that I hold this up to even the lightest parts of my skin. I flip my arm over and, oh, that's a lot darker over there. Oh, yeah, that's pretty dark. Oh, that's lighter, but it's still not the same color. I'm not white. I'm a shade of brown. I'm not just one even shade of brown. I mean, there's a lot based off of how much of my skin sees the sun. I've got lots of shades in there, and I'm not consistent. I'm not consistent whatsoever. I mean, I do this and, oh, wow, that's bright. I mean, I got some sections of skin that don't see the light of the day. And I've got others that, they see all kinds of sun. I mean, this is my trucking arm window, and that sucker's it's pretty dark. I mean, I do this, and you can tell a difference. You can tell which one's my window arm and which one isn't. Okay? My point is this, that after what happened at the Tower of Babel with the confusing of the languages, we, birds of a feather flock together. Okay? We divided ourselves amongst the languages. For one reason or another, we traveled outwards. In our travels and the places where we went, natural selection, survival of the fittest, different traits, different things started happening to us as we traveled into different climates. Different colors, different shapes and heights and bone mass, bone density, muscle mass and density, and all these other kind of things. There was a lot of things that played into here. And in time, adaptation, survival of the fittest, different genes started falling off and different things were highlighted better. And next thing you know, now you've got all the different races representing themselves. I mean, when I say that the Tower of Babel is the origin story of the nations, I'm not lying here. Okay? And it really doesn't take all that long for these type of changes to take place. It really doesn't. It's mating, it's survival of the fittest. It's, as these certain, genes fall off and fall away and now they have been lost to the hands of time type of a thing. And it's like, I mean, not necessarily lost to the hands of time. Maybe that's a bad way of wording that, but that as different things get phased out of a particular section of gene pool, it's next to impossible to get it back. Okay. And there was something about, like, yes, the genes, the DNA, whatever, they're still there per se, but if it's buried amongst multiple layers of recessive genes, that it's levels of code that, in a matter of speaking, can't be reached. It's been I don't want to say genetically modified, but it's been breeded out. You know what I mean? It's things that have been breeded out for one way or another. God confused the languages. We divided ourselves out of necessity. We had to be able to understand each other, and we congregated based off of that. And I got no idea if God had a rhyme or reason, how he chose what people got what language. I don't know. Doesn't say. I have no idea. But only 2 generations moved from a family of 8. It's kind of easy to assume that for the most part, everybody was represented there. All inclusive. Everybody was represented. There you have it. Holy crap. I got the sneezes. I'm sorry. Hold on. Let me take a drink. But we divided ourselves. And then we dispersed ourselves. We went to different places. And since the human body is amazing, and not just humans, but like animals in general, you go to, and I know I've talked about this in other episodes, like the squirrel, where I'm at, it looks completely different than squirrels that I've seen in Canada. I mean, yeah, it's the same animal. Sure, they're both squirrels, but they don't look a lot alike. You kind of got to know that that's a squirrel and that's a squirrel, and you put them together and maybe they'll make another squirrel. I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know, but it's interesting how, just 1,000 miles, not even that. Well, okay, yeah, maybe 1,000 miles. That's all that separates us from the great white north. And it's like, if you have an opportunity to see Jon Snow, his wolf ain't going to look like your wolf. It's not. Because different areas of the country, different countries in general, different temperature climates, animals that live in these areas don't look like animals that live in other areas, even though it's the same animal. Why? Because different traits are necessary in order for them to survive. The same thing goes with people. Yeah. We have the ability to adapt. It is so amazing. We haven't even scratched the surface on the different things that our bodies are able to do to adapt to our environment. But we can. I mean, it's no wonder looking at animals that, yeah, this explains a lot about how the many races of the planet came to be. It really does, doesn't it? It explains so much. You know, and even if you are not willing to accept the premise of the Tower of Babel, that God just for some reason, he decided to, you know, divide the languages and confuse everybody. I mean, have y'all ever been to India? Okay, I mean, okay, really, let's take a step back for a second. Let's go with, okay, like being right here. You know, I live in Central Illinois. All right. When asked, I don't tell people I speak English because I don't. I don't speak English. I do not speak the Queen's English. I don't. I speak American. More specifically, I speak Central Illinois American slang. I speak a dialect of American. There's not a lot that American has to do with English. Yes, we share a common tongue, but at the same time, there's a lot of words that means a lot of different things between the countries. I speak American. Thank you very much. But you have many dialects, many accents, and in all honesty, yes, you know, it's all the same. It's all the basic language, but there are still words that has completely different meanings, and words that I may think is a gibberish made up word, but it has meaning over here in this dialect, in this region with this accent. You know, it's got meaning. And that's just the US of A. 200 some odd years worth of living in different areas and dialects changing. Spanish is the same way. You got, you know, Spanish, but you've got so many different dialects, and just because two people speak English, two people speak Spanish doesn't mean that they'll be able to speak to each other, because in some cases the dialects are so different that they might not even be able to communicate. I mean, yeah, on a fundamental level, sure, yes. There's a lot of similarities between the two, but all said and done, conversational part of the language, they're not going to understand each other, You know, India, where I was talking about earlier. Many languages in that nation. Many dialects in that nation. Some of them, you know, a lot of them sound different, but there's enough differences in there that doesn't necessarily mean that one is going to be able to communicate with another. Just because they share the same language, their dialects may not be compatible at all. And we see that happening all over the place. And yet, we think of the Tower of Babel with God confusing the tongues, that this is completely beyond the scope of possible. When it's like, dude, we see similar. I mean, not exactly the same, mind you, and I get that, but we see similar happening in our own lives. I mean, holy crap. I mean, have you ever tried to talk to somebody that's speaking text messages? LOL, ROTF, LOL. Holy crap, are you kidding me? You better RSVP your DVDs, you know, and keep them out of your BVDs and ASAP. What the heck did he just say? IDK. What? Are you kidding me? You know, I mean, it's differences in dialects, okay? It's not that hard to believe when you really stop and think about the implications, how it may have happened, and you know what? That actually kind of does make some sense. That actually does make some sense. So, guys, I appreciate you staying here. That's all I got for this episode. That's really it. I appreciate y'all stopping by, and yeah, till next time. For a complete listing of episodes and shows, you can head to thehohoshow.com and click on the episode tab. See you next time.